because you're jumping back into the gap.
Hey, Coach. Welcome to the Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Oliver. I appreciate you joining us for this week's podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit basketballimmersion.com for more coaching resources and access to all the basketball podcasts. I hope you will give us a shout out on social media, on Twitter at @BBallImmersion, or on Instagram at basketballimmersion to help me continue to share the game. Enjoy the episode. Coach is super excited today to have Adrian Griffin with us. Coach Griffin is currently an assistant coach for the reigning champion NBA Toronto Raptors. In total, he has been an assistant coach with 5 different organizations. By all accounts, he is one of the top assistant coaches in the NBA and on his path to becoming a future head coach. Coach Griffin, thanks for sharing the game with us.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Chris. I really appreciate it. Big fan of yours from afar, so I'm glad we got to connect on this.
Well, grateful for that and excited to dive into this topic. And we haven't talked enough, probably just pure about the process of developing and refining a coaching philosophy. So I wanted to start you with this. A famous sport researcher and contributor to Coach Education, Rainer Martins, has this quote about philosophy. The coaching philosophy you live is a reflection of you. You own it. So to me, it starts with this question to you. Why are you coaching?
That's a great question, and it's something that I've had to tweak and revisit a couple times throughout my coaching career. And I retired from playing basketball in 2008 and got immediately into coaching. I was fortunate to be offered a job right away, and at the time, to be honest with you, I didn't know why I was coaching. If I was speaking truthfully, it was because it allowed me a transition, a post-playing career. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So when I was offered the coaching job, obviously, I was smart enough at the time to know that these jobs don't come along often. So I wanted to jump on it. I knew I wanted to stay close to the game. But as I've been able to coach, and I've been fortunate to be a coach in this league for 12 years plus, I really had the time to really define why I wanted to coach. So it went from, post-career, finding a new avenue to really identifying why I wanted to coach. And that's to impact change and to change lives, and especially our players. One of my just beliefs or values that I try to live by is that better people make better players. So I'm more concerned about the character of our players when I work with them, getting them to think correctly, because that's going to transfer over to the court. I know that there's a lot of coaches, I've had a ton of coaches who only focus on the X and O's, but, I've really learned from working with some phenomenal players that really helped shape my philosophy. And if you coach long enough, you know that players really teach you more sometimes than what you teach them. And what I've learned is that when you pour into someone else's dream, and if you're excited and enthusiastic about someone else's dream, it always comes back 100-fold to you. So I make, a conscious effort of trying to reach people from the inner, work from the inner, and then the outer always takes care of itself.
It's great. And I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper into that, this concept of the inner and everything else. But maybe like at the time when you transitioned from player to coach, like to me, I think that's a huge compliment that somebody wanted you right away to be on their coaching staff. Did you take it so? Or did you have that moment to be able to reflect and say, hey, this is a great reflection of me as a person?
Well, in 2008, that year before I retired, obviously I wanted to keep playing like all professional athletes. It's hard to hang it up. But at the time when I was playing for the Chicago Bulls, they were playing the younger guys. And, it wasn't a rebuild, but we were kind of focusing on our youth. And so I had two choices. I could either have gotten better and resentful and became a problem, or do what my father has taught me is just to adversity is the opportunity to show your character, show what you're made of. So I began to just work with the younger guys when I could, and because I wanted to. I love those guys. We had Lou Alding and Chris Duhon, Kirk Heinrich, Ben Gordon, to name a few, and they were awesome guys. And I just wanted to contribute to the team, and so whatever bit of knowledge I had as a veteran player, I just wanted to share it and pass it on to them. And so Coach Scott Skiles and his staff kind of recognized me, just going out of my way to really make this thing work for the team and put the team first. And Scott Skiles told me whenever I retire that he would have a job for me. And he was true to his word. I got traded to Seattle, and then Seattle moved to Oklahoma City. Then I got traded from Oklahoma City to Milwaukee. Coach Scott Skiles got released from the Bulls, and he took the Milwaukee Bucks job. And we were reunited. And I went all the way through training camp, and I thought I made the team. And he called me at 2:59, which was 3 o'clock was actually the cutoff date for the roster. And so he called me at 2:59 and told me he had to let me go. But he said, why don't you join my staff? And I took a couple of days and thought about it. And you're right. I do believe it was a reflection of not just me, but it was a reflection of all the values that my father taught me growing up, because he was my role model. He's no longer here with me, but he taught me some important values, to be principles to live by. So that one thing did make me very happy to believe that my father was still living, even though he wasn't there, and that I was able to be here where I am today because of all those values that he taught me.
That's tremendous. And you can tell that very, very late in your career, you start to develop that servitude to the game, which I know reflects through in your philosophy from what you've said already. But I'm imagining, again, you developing your coaching philosophy, as many people, it all starts with reflection. So what made your favorite coach your favorite is a question that I like to ask coaches.
Well, my favorite coach, and I've been fortunate to be a part of just tremendous Hall of Fame coaches. I played for Big Don Nelson in Dallas, the most winningest coach of all time in the NBA, phenomenal mind for the game. Rick Pitino, Jeff Van Gundy. I mean, the list goes on. PJ Carlissimo, Scott Skiles, Avery Johnson. Now, I've been fortunate. And from a coaching standpoint, I've been under Tom Thibodeau, Scott Skiles again, Billy Donovan, who taught me so much about that type of servant leadership, the way he took care of his staff. And then now I'm with Coach Nurse, who's a brilliant mind on both sides of the ball. So I've been fortunate and I've been exposed to tremendous coaching. However, I think the one coach that has had the most impact on my life as far as from a coaching philosophy is my CA coach, Tyler Jones. And just to give you a bit of background and put this in the context, I did not get drafted coming out of college. And I spent 3 years in the CBA trying to chase that dream of being an NBA player. It was there where I learned, sacrifice and hard work. And my coach, Tyler Jones, would work with me every day for an hour before practice and an hour after practice. And just watching how he was just gave of himself so unselfishly, to not just to me, but to the other players that wanted to work. He was always available, always accessible. And I remember one time it was during a game and it was at halftime. And I wasn't playing that well at the time. And a couple of my teammates were getting a little frustrated at me. And so they kind of lashed out at me at halftime about me sharing the ball and allowing them to do more. And in front of everyone, the head coach said, he didn't say Adrian is my guy, but Adrian is the leader of this team. He is our go-to guy. and we're going to put the ball in his hand so that he can make our team better. And he stood up for me. And I never forgot that, how a coach can impart that type of belief and trust. And I went on to that season and the following season, I went on to play with great confidence because I knew the coach believed in me. And that belief is so critical as a coach, that coach-player relationship. And those, 3 or 4 words, I believe in you, are so powerful. And it's something that I share with my players. I tell them that I believe in you. I know that you can do this. And you can see it in their face, when they truly believe that you are vested in their goals and their dreams and you want to help them to achieve those goals. You can build a relationship with a player that becomes not just in the moment, but becomes a lifelong type of relationship and commitment. So Tyler Jones, I learned a lot from him, and just far as that type of commitment that you make to a player outside of the X and O's.
Well, that's great. And obviously it speaks to that time of your career too, where someone like that was so impactful as well. And maybe before we even get into your philosophy a little bit more specifically, give people a perspective. When you get interviewed, whether it's an assistant coaching job or a head coaching job in the NBA, how detailed of questions do you get about your philosophy? Does it go into pretty extensive detail?
Well, I believe, yes. Your coaching philosophy is everything. You're basically presenting to them who you are. Like, who is Adrian Griffin? Who is Chris Oliver? And sometimes they know a little bit about you. Sometimes they know a lot about you. But you're going to have to go in there and articulate who you are as a coach and as a person. So when you're developing your coaching philosophy, in essence, you're really coming up with values that say, this is who I am, or a belief system of this is who I am. And most people think that coaching philosophy is about the X and O's. That's more of an offensive philosophy, a defensive philosophy, whether you say we're going to push the ball to the baseline or we believe in ball pressure, whatever. That's your defensive philosophy. And obviously our offensive philosophy is, we want to play with space and pace and, the 7 seconds or quicker, whatever. That tends to be the X and O's part. But what they really want to know is how you're going to lead, and Coach Kerr, Steve Kerr, he really gives a great example of how that's how he was presented when he wanted to coach the Golden State Warriors. I believe he went out to Seattle and sat down with the coach there, and he asked him, how are you going to coach the team? And he started to get into the X and O's, but he said, how are you going to make people feel when they walk into the arena, into the practice court? And I think that's the big picture that you want to take. How we're going to conduct ourselves every day when we come in to the gym, and what are the beliefs and the morals and the guide. Your values act as guidelines of how we're going to behave as a unit, because everyone's going to have their own philosophies and beliefs and history. Everyone brings that to work, but just like on the court, you can only have one game plan. When you step into the building, you can only have one type of game plan where everyone's working together. So, your coaching philosophy can consist of many things, but I think it depends on the emphasis that you want to take as a coach. It could be player development, it could be winning, it could be self-improvement, or it can be, at a younger stage when you're talking about kids, you want to make it inclusive and fun. I would say on the pro level, I think it's all of the above. Obviously winning is a premium in this league. You have to win. You have to produce. It's a performance type of league. But I think we're shifting. You're starting to see a shift where what we call the soft skills are coming into play. And that's how we treat each other, how we make each other feel. So going into that coaching philosophy, you want to have something ready to present to them as far as how you think and you believe, but yet you want to be open as well, because no one knows everything. It'd be false for me to try to go into the interview thinking that I have it all figured out. But you do want to have a basis of how you want to run the team. So doing this quarantine actually has been great, because I've been able to really take my time and identify who I am and how I would like to coach a team.
Hey, Coach, just a brief interruption of our podcast to take time to tell you about one of our supporters, manscaped.com. Ow, damn. Those are the screams I used to make when I would cut myself shaving before I knew about Manscaped. Thank you, Manscaped, for turning my loud shrieks into multiple peaks. Coaches, it's great to be able to share a product that I've used. I can confirm that manscaped.com works. Men start taking notes, because Manscaped accidents are finally a thing of the past. The Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0 has been beautifully designed to reduce those painful nicks tugs. This is their third generation trimmer featuring advanced skin safe technology, so you keep your bad boys nice and smooth. The Manscaped engineering team obsesses over technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience, and they spent 18 months perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created, and just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. When I tell you this is premium, I mean premium. The battery will last up to 90 minutes, so you can take a longer shave. The water-resistant technology allows you to shave in the shower too. One of the coolest features is the LED light, which illuminates grooming areas for a closer and more precise trimming. You need to try this out for yourself. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ARMCHAIR at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ARMCHAIR, ARMCHAIR, at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use code ARMCHAIR. Your balls will thank you. Now back to the podcast. Well, I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that too, and your transition into coaching and through your coaching path so far. What are some of the things, how have you personally worked to develop your philosophy? Because again, like in the intensity of an NBA season and the focus on doing your best job you can as an assistant, what are some of the things that have helped you kind of shape this philosophy as you go through?
I've been fortunate to really be under, like I stated before, be under some really tremendous and awesome coaches, and also to be a part of the NBA for the last 20 plus years. So when I started to really think about my coaching philosophy and where to start, I began to think about my playing career and think about the coaches who got the best out of me and why, and how they made me feel. And I think that's so important. I think just being a former player has helped me to really empathize. You know, that's really important. You know, when obviously emotional intelligence is a important buzzword nowadays, and I would agree with that. It's very important. And I think learning to empathize with your players is so beneficial to you as a coach, because it allows you to know what to do next. And if you see a player struggling with his confidence, you could put yourself in his shoes, and that's going to allow you to give him what he needs. You know, maybe it's a word of encouragement, or maybe it's accountability. You know, is he working hard enough? So I started there as a player and just trying to identify some of the values and the strategies that some coaches took on me to allow me to reach my full potential. And then, you know, again, you know, just being under so many awesome coaches from a coaching standpoint, you know, being with Coach Thibodeau for 5 years, you know, coming into coaching was Scott Skiles for my first 2 years. You know, he's big on accountability, playing hard, you know, the hard work, doing your job. Same with Coach Thibodeau. So every coach that I've been under has really shaped my philosophy. So what I did, I just went down the line and I said, well, okay, what did I learn from Scott Skiles? What did I learn from Coach Thibodeau? What did I learn from Billy Donovan? What did I learn from Coach Nurse? So, man, it was really eye-opening and inspiring type of reflection because I'm the type of guy that I keep note after note. Every stop that I've been on in the NBA, as far as from a coaching standpoint, I have folders and folders of just notes. So going over all those notes, took me down memory lane, and I was really astonished about a lot of the nuggets that I was able to accumulate over the years. So I started there, as a player, as a coach, and it allowed me to kind of formulate what I believe is the basis to my coaching philosophy.
Yeah, that's great. There's no doubt everyone will want those notes now too, Coach. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it is such a time for reflection and everything else. And you talked about going through this process and tweaking it. We're going to come back to that, but maybe let's start from the beginning here. Why is a coaching philosophy so important for you?
I think the main, reason is because it gives you a blueprint how to make and base your decisions. And I think as coaches, you number one, I think you really got to be very sensitive to the changing of time as far as how we coach and what we say. And then I think two, the players want a relationship more than ever. I remember as a player, the coach never said anything to me outside of really cussing me out about what I needed to do. But outside of that, I never really had a relationship with them. And I think these players, I mean, you've heard this saying that they don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I think that's very relevant to today's coaching philosophy as far as building these relationships with the players. So taking that time to really determine how you want on the court and off the court is very critical to not only the team's success, but your success as a coach. And I think the coaches that really take the time, and you could tell, I was with Coach Thibodeau for those 5 years, and he had a humongous notebook of just his coaching philosophy. And he was always prepared for every situation. And I know for a fact that was due because of all the preparation that he took into creating his coaching philosophy. There was never a time when we were caught off guard. He knew how to handle every situation. That doesn't mean he was always right, but he always had an answer, and he always tried to give a adequate and effective answer. And the players respected him for that because they knew that he was prepared. If you listen to a lot of his former players, the number one thing they talk about is his preparation. So again, that taught me a lot about, my ability to go into an interview and being prepared about what I believe in.
Do you feel like, having said some of these things, do you feel you would have been an even better player if you had been coached with more of a focus on soft skills? That's not to throw coaches under the bus who coach you, but just to say from a philosophical perspective, would you have valued more of that within your playing career?
Well, I think 100% yes. Only because reason why I say that is because we are all human beings. I think across the board, I think people are going to respond better to love, care, and acceptance than being ridiculed and demeaned. And look, that was the coaching style. That's like it was nothing personal. Every player would tell you growing up in that era that's just the way coaches coach. They felt like they needed to break you down to build you back up again. However, again, we live in a different time, and society is different, and you have to be able to change with those times. So yes, I'm the type of person that I responded probably better, more to encouragement, maybe more pat on the back. I probably is one of those players that you would label a pleaser. You wanted to please the coach. So I didn't respond well to being yelled at or cussed out. But some coaches will argue that it makes you tough, and it did. Growing up for me, like my high school coach never cursed or yelled or raised his voice. My father was a minister, never cursed, yelled, or raised his voice. So when I went to Seton Hall with PJ Carlesimo, you can imagine, the change of environment for me and how difficult it was for me to adapt. But in saying that, once I got to the league, because I had PJ, I developed a thicker skin. I was able to, take a licking and keep ticking, so to speak. So, but could that have happened regardless? I don't know. But my coaching style is, I'm not a yeller. I would rather hold you accountable with our values. And one thing you'll probably hear me say often is that let your values be the bad guy. When you come in with a set of values and you hold players accountable to those, all you have to do is go back and say, okay, this is what we agreed upon. And I think it's important to get the buy-in from the players up front and ask them, what is it going to take for us to be a good team and reach our full potential? And they'll tell you, they'll say, hard work, unselfishness, communication, whatnot. And anytime that a player is not displaying those values, you have the right to confront them and hold them accountable and say, this is not what we agreed upon. These are the values that we all agreed that we would abide by. And it, everyone has skin in the game then. And I think that's the better way to coach, when you let the values do your talking for you.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. And segue into values here, which, again, just simply to understand, values are the foundation of the philosophy. It's where you spend your time and energy. Are you okay if we take coaches through some of your values to give a perspective on the things?
Well, again, your values and your coaching philosophy is going to change often, depending on every experience, but your core values tend to remain the same. And so I probably would start with my core values. And again, I was raised in the church. My father was the minister. So my core values are tended to be rooted, from a more religious, spiritual standpoint, from the Bible, if you will. So my first one would be faithful over a few things, or be faithful over the little things, and then you will be rewarded with much more. Like I mentioned before, when I didn't get drafted out of the CBA, my father was actually really instrumental in helping me not throw in a towel, because I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up on my dream. And he basically taught me that, control what you can control. Even though I was in the NBA, I was in the CBA, where it gave me the opportunity to work on my game. That was what was presented to me at the time. And I could complain and murmured and play the blame game, but I was faithful over that, and allowed me to and play for 9 years. And like I said before, when I got into coaching, I could have been bitter, but that I wasn't playing, but I kept a great attitude, and I was faithful over what was handed to me, and it allowed me to get into coaching. And I could tell you story after story how that has impacted my life. And so that's one of the lessons or the values that I pass on to my players. If you're not playing, okay, what can you control? Control what you control. Be faithful over showing up every day with a great attitude. Be faithful over your conditioning and your preparation. And we all know, in the NBA, in 82 games, you're going to get an opportunity to showcase what you can do on the court, but it's going to be contingent upon you being prepared. And that preparation starts with having the right mindset of kind of not falling into the self-pity, but taking on the responsibilities that are right in front of you. So that would be number one. Number two for me would, again, this has a kind of biblical connotation to it, but it would, number two is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So as a coach, for me, what that means, again, is the empathy that we show for our players and our co-workers, treating them with the respect. Everyone wants to be treated with respect, love, care, acceptance. I think having that strong sense of belonging and making players feel valued. I read something that said that we should make our players feel valued even though they're not the most valued. A lot of times the attention goes to the star players, your MVP players, your Dirk Nowinski's. I was fortunate to play with Dirk, and he was an awesome guy. But then you have the role players that, that sacrifice just as much in a different way. Tom Thibodeau used to say, your roles are different, but the work is the same. Everyone has different roles, and you have to embrace them and accept them. But the work should be the same for everyone. That's to show up with the right mindset of putting the team first. So that would be number two. And then lastly, number three for me, as far as core values go, is what a man sows and what a man reaps. And that just, to me, that's the accountability part, of just showing up and being truthful to yourself, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, am I doing everything that I possibly can to help my team win? Or as a coach, am I being the change that I want to see? Because a lot of times, we hold, as coaches, we hold our players to a high standard, and we got to know that we have to be that change. If we're demanding excellence, are we working hard ourselves? One of the challenges for me is just to staying in good conditioning as a former player, and I probably never will reach the NBA type of conditioning that I once had, but I have to hold myself accountable that I got to get in the gym. I got to work, because the players see it, and so if you put a little into something, you're going to get a little bit out of it. If you invest in relationships and you put everything into those relationships will come back. And I've seen relationships that you just always tend to come back to you, good or bad. If you put a little into those relationships and you don't value people, sooner or later it catches up to you. So what you sow is what you reap across the board.
Great reflection of your core values and great understanding of that. And then from those core values, what do you go into next in terms of your philosophy? Because obviously those are your foundation that directs everything else. So how much do those, or what are some of the things that those things influence next for you?
I think the number one thing is bringing those values to life, to put action between those values. I think one of the greatest examples that you can use in sports, especially in the NBA, is the culture that San Antonio has built over the years with Greg Popovich. He has his three core values. One is to pound the rock. So he talks about coming in the gym every day with the right mindset to work to get better. And another one of his is leave the ego at the door. I mean, if you just did those two things alone, I mean, you're going to be ahead of a lot of your competitors. But, you know, ability alone won't get you there. And I always say the formula for success is ability plus coachability equals success in this league. And Tim Duncan would always approach the off season as a rookie. And I think that was really reflective on how the type of leadership and mindset that he had. And that's a big reason why they were winners of 5 NBA championships. Because, you know, the ego gets in the way a lot of times from coaching. Think about how many times as coaches, you want to correct a player, but you're afraid of how that player is going to respond. So you withhold that correction, even though you know it's going to help that coach. Help that player. And so leaving your ego at the door, you know, to me, that's a very powerful value for any organization. And then the third one that he uses is fill the cup, which he describes as making deposits back into your players. So he's notorious with holding these dinners for the players and ordering wine, you know, some of the most expensive wines, and inviting the players' families and friends and taking the time to pat them on the back and encouraging them. Because as coaches, we're always, when we're holding them to a higher standard, we're making withdrawals from them. We're asking them to give us something. And so it's important that we give back to them, you know, refill their cup. So, you know, again, your values are important, but what's more important is putting action behind those. So when you're creating those values, it's important to add an action statement to those values, not just saying hard work. Okay, what does that mean? What is hard work? That means to showing up and giving maximum effort in the drills, you know, in the weight room. And so when you really are clear with your values and you're able to articulate them as a team, the players, they know what's required of them. And it's hard to hold people accountable if they don't know what they're supposed to be accountable to. And so it's important that you really identify those values and really put action behind those.
It's such a great point about action steps. And, you know, the other thing that obviously shines through with what you're saying is these are not just your values, but also the values that you want your team to embody.
For sure. I think one of the most important practices in creating team values is getting the input from the players. You know, asking them what is important for our team, what's the most important things that we need to do as a team, and how we need to behave to be successful this year. And especially when you get to this level in the NBA, you know, these players, they've been around basketball their whole lives. They've been around some phenomenal coaches that from some credible institutions, either college or high school. So they know from a basic fundamentals standpoint of what goes into winning, and they'll be able to articulate that to you. And when the team and then when the players have some skin in the game, that's when the ownership really starts to take off for that team. And that's the beauty of sports, when you get that 100% buy-in from the players because they believe in what you're doing and they believe that they had some input into their own destiny, so to speak. Good things happen. I take Coach Nurse winning the championship last year. You know, he did a phenomenal job of just getting the buy-in from the players from day one, from Wide, to Mark, to Kyle Lowry. You know, everyone was on the same page. And Coach Nurse, he worked hard. You know, you don't get to see that except behind closed doors. You know, the countless calls to the players and the small conversations, the side conversations, all the, the nuances that it goes into getting 15 professional athletes to buy into one common goal.
It's such an interesting part of it too, which is like often when we talk about developing a philosophy, we also have to consider what are some of the things that are going to challenge that philosophy the most. And
Right.
As a youth coach, for example, parents. As a pro coach, what are some of the things that challenge your philosophy the most? Obviously, you just said players. What else?
Well, I think it's a lot of outside voices, and I think the number one thing for, I've never been a head coach in the NBA, but again, I've been a part of the NBA for so long. There's a lot of pressure to win, and win now. And, you can easily, to jeopardize your values because of the pressure to win right now. And you see it. Coaches, they sign a 3-4 year deal, but after year one, they're let go. And so sometimes it's tempting to go for the wins and kind of compromise some of your values. For instance, maybe you have a player that is a bad apple, but because he can put more points on the board, you're going to tend to put up with him and keep him around when you know that the best thing to do is to let him go. So, it's many things that coaches have to confront, and it's not easy being in that head coach seat because of the pressures to have those immediate results right away. So you really have to be convicted to your values, and you're not people around you, they see it, especially the players. The players know if you're convicted. If you come in and you're talking about, unselfishness and commitment, and then a player doesn't display that, but you tend to look the other way, they see that and they pick up on it, and it's a sure way to lose credibility. So before you do this, you gotta really believe that, if I go down, it's gonna go because I believed in these values. I was convicted to these values. And I'm talking about your core values. I'm not, obviously you have to be flexible as a coach. There's just certain things, especially when you're dealing with your star players, they're going to have a little more leeway. And, we all know that. I'm talking about the core things, just about the respect factor of showing up on time and doing your job. You got to be able to stand your ground and be convicted on these things, or eventually it'll catch up to you and bite you in the rear end.
Hey, Coach, just a brief interruption of the podcast to hear from one of our supporters. There is no shortage of action going on with our partners over at betonline.ag. The sports world is slow making its way back, with the NBA announcing its return in late July. But right now, UFC, boxing, NASCAR, and international soccer have all resumed play, and BetOnline has the best odds, lines for their upcoming games and matches. Need more? BetOnline has simulated NFL, NBA, and UFC happening live every day for our devout gamblers to check out. BetOnline also offers hundreds of live casino games, poker tournaments, and the best props in the business. Visit betonline.ag on your computer or mobile device and join now to receive your welcome bonus. BetOnline.ag, your online wagering experts. Now back to the podcast. Can you talk a little bit too? Again, I think your career path and your coaching path makes you a great person to talk about this, because I think often misunderstood in coaches forming their philosophy is that not every player is playing for the same reason. Is that a fair comment? And can you talk about how you address that?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you talk to 15 players, you're probably going to get 15 different answers. However, it's important that you do take that time to sit down with each player to get to know them, get to know that their motivations for getting up in the morning and being subjected to putting their body through so much stress and being away from their family. So you want to ask them, like, we want to get out of this. What are your goals? And when you listen to them, what that's going to do is allow the scene to be open so that you're able to share with them your goals and the goals for the team. A lot of times the players just want to be heard. Once they're heard, you can almost see a weight is lifted off their back, but then you're able to say, okay, how can we work together on this so that, the team goals are reached as well as some of your personal goals. And, truth be told, that's what a team is about. It's going to be some sacrifices, but a lot of times, again, when you let that player know that at least you took the time out to hear him, he's going to be more receptive to what you got to hear. So that respect factor is so important in coaching today. It's just not my way or the highway. And so you're going to have to develop that into your coaching philosophy as far as valuing those relationships. You really have to shift from a transactional type of coach to a more of a transformational coach where you're dealing with imparting that time into building those strong relationships. And look, you're going to have to be both. You're going to have to be a transactional coach because it's based on performance and results, but you're also going to have to be that type of transformational coach to bridge those relationships so that they're open to hearing you. Sometimes it really comes down to having that relationship intact so that what you communicate to them or what you try to teach or coach them, they don't take it personal, and they know it's coming from a good place. So that's really shaped my philosophy as far as those relationships goes. Again, as I said, I grew up in the transactional type of coaching where you do your job, you show up, no questions asked. But now you're going to have to listen to these players. And one of the best advice that I've received over the last year or two is from one of the sports psychologists. We have Dr. Brian Shaw, and with the Raptors, and I was kind of going tit for tat with this player, and I didn't want to budge any ground, and neither did this player. And so consequently, we got nowhere. So after practice, Dr. Shaw pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, you're doing a phenomenal job. I just want to give you a bit of advice." And I said, I'm open for it. And he said, give them a grain of truth, and it was almost like an epiphany, that I was just trying to win and to have it on my way or the highway again. But he taught me that, hey, just give them a grain of truth. Yet I understand what you're saying. You're right. That's a great point that you're making. And then now I've learned to say, especially on the pro level, when you're dealing with guys that may have just as much knowledge and experience of the game as you do, you're really going to have to incorporate their input into it. So now I'll say that's a phenomenal idea. Let's do it my way first, and then the second rep, let's do it your way. And I created a win-win situation. So I'm constantly reshaping my philosophy season to season.
Well, and you're speaking to that right there. You're saying the importance of removing your ego from the equation too, which has got to be a progressive part of this.
Absolutely. And, what I've learned, though, the more you give, the more you get in return. So you letting go of some of those, what I call, false beliefs that if you let go of the power, then you won't be able to control the situation. But what I'm learning is quite the opposite. The more that you give and the more you input people, the more power that you give away. And, Phil Jackson speaks of this. I'm a big fan of his. Not, I don't agree with some of his philosophies, but I think you can't deny what he's done for the game of basketball, winning 13 overall championships, 2 as a player, 6 with the Bulls, 5 with the Lakers. So this guy, he was doing something right. And, one of the things he talks about is giving up that power, letting go of your ego, giving some of that to the players, and in return, you're going to get greater buy-in, because now these players have more skin in the game, and they're going to work twice as hard on some of the things they want to do because they don't want to fail. Then, conversely, to you making them do something. So it takes give and take, and it also takes being seasoned to do it. You got to know when to put your foot down and say, this is the way we have to do it. When you're in the playoffs or you're in the game, in timeouts, sometimes that may not be the ideal time to ask the players, opinions. You're going to have to really, take the reins. Coach Nurse did a phenomenal job of that at times in the playoffs where we needed direction. And so he gave us, the blueprint, X, Y, Z. This is what we need to do. But there's times during the season where, maybe it's a practice plan that you could ask the players how they feel, what they believe, what drills do you cover today. And sometimes players will say, hey, we need a day off, coach. And you got to take their input into consideration, and because that's going to foster greater buy-in. So it's all about having a feel, and that's why it's so important for coaches not to skip the steps. And what I mean by that is, there's been times in my career where I was so in a hurry to be a head coach, but looking back, I'm grateful for the route that I've taken, because it's allowed me to gather a wealth of experiences, learning how to deal with just all the different facets of the game, not just the X and O's, but it's more about managing those relationships. And so I'm fortunate for the route that I've taken, because it really opened my eyes on, wow, it's not about the X and O's. I remember the first interview that I went into, I believe I was interviewing for the Philly job 8-9 years ago. And I took my big notebooks into the interview process of, my defensive philosophy and my offensive philosophy. And I thought that was what it was all about, But little did I know, they already know when you go into these coaching interviews, they know you can coach, right? They probably have handpicking you from a winning program, so they know that you have a great feel about what it's going to take from a strategic, tactical type of viewpoint or approach. What they want to know is can you lead? Can you manage people? Can you manage relationships? And again, that's where your coaching philosophy comes in, as far as what makes you the right leader for a program. And you answer that question with going in with a really bona fide type of coaching philosophy.
Yeah, it's great. And it's again, you keep coming back to that all the time. But I also want to highlight, because you mentioned this, that it's also something that you can tweak. It's a living document, right? It breathes. Yes. Can you talk about those changes a little bit that you kind of have instituted, even a little bit, without, you don't have to say specific examples, but that you've gone through changes in this document?
Oh, for sure. I think it's the experiences that we go through as coaches, if we allow ourselves to be open to those experiences. And again, not try to skip the steps or rush the process. But every opportunity that you have, as far as with a player, is going to allow you to really shape and hone your philosophy. And I'll give you a prime example with Jimmy Butler. I had Jimmy as a rookie, and at the time, Jimmy had a lot of confidence, and rightly so. He was very talented, but anybody that knows Coach Thibodeau, he just didn't play rookies. He was a veteran type of coach, and he would play veterans 48 minutes before he threw a rookie out on the court, and that was very difficult for Jimmy to grasp and to take and accept. And so he often would let me know his displeasure about that in a certain kind of way. So he was very challenging in the beginning of our relationship. And then on the other side of that equation, Coach Thibodeau was, he's a demanding coach, and he's about hard work and performance. And so he was kindly persuading me to get Jimmy up to speed so that he could play him. And, I'm going into my third or fourth year of coaching, and I realized that, man, I'm not prepared for this. I just thought that, a player just showed up like I did, and you did whatever the coach told you to do, and all was well. But this was probably the first time that, I was presented with a type of situation that I didn't know how to handle. I didn't know how to get through to Jimmy, and I didn't know how to raise his game to a certain level where, that would be acceptable to Coach Tibbs' standards. So I was in my office one day, and I was kind of feeling the pressure. You from a player development standpoint, there's pressure to get these guys better, and that's our job. And I felt like I was inadequate at my job at the time. And so, I'm in my office during working hours, and I closed my door, and I just started to pray. And I said, Lord, I need some help. I don't know what to do. I'm kind of getting attacked from every angle, and I could use a little assistance. And what I sensed in my spirit was to read. I kept hearing that over and over, read. And I was like, read? And then it finally dawned on me that the answer is out there. I just have to find it. And so what I proceeded to do for the next 48 hours, I ordered almost every book on Amazon on coaching, on building relationships, on sports psychology, on player development. I mean, I really dove into this, completely. And I started to research on how to develop players, not just from on the court, but off the court, and how to build those relationships with Jimmy, how to talk to him, how to communicate with him. And so I learned some valuable lessons during that stretch. And then, 4 years later, and I'm not taking credit for this, but 4 years later, Jimmy Butler, he received the Most Improved Player of the Year. And during his speech, he said that, one of the coaches that had a profound impact on him was Adrian Griffin. And that really made me feel good, that I got in the trenches with him. I was able to develop as a coach first to help him. And a lot of times, that's what this is all about when you're talking about your coaching philosophy and your values. It's about you continue to strive as a coach, how you become better and better at your craft. Because if the players can't get better unless the coaches are getting better. So I've always remembered that lesson, when I'm going into practices. All right, am I prepared? Am I being the best? And you'll hear me say this again, you have to be the change that you want to see. I always kind of live by that Gandhi quote. You have to be the change. If you want players to live to a certain standard, then you're going to have to challenge yourself. You're going to have to push yourself. And, I mentioned how, the coaches that you're under or have been under, they're going to shape your philosophy. But I failed to also add that, reading, there's a wealth of knowledge about out there. If you go into my study, I have books upon books. It drives my wife crazy. It's like I'm an addict on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's like I order a book every day. And that's kind of like my fetish, but I enjoy learning. And there's been tremendous books out there that have shaped too many to name. But, the answers are there. You just got to be willing to go out and get them.
Can't thank you enough for sharing that story, which again really paints the picture of this process and everything that goes with it. Coach, just maybe in wrapping it up, I want to give you, one of the coaches that you've worked under or you played for, and maybe give us some idea of something that you adapted from them that is a part of your philosophy. And let's start with Scott Skiles, since he gave you your first coaching opportunity.
Well, I think Scott Skiles was, accountability. I played for Coach Skiles and I coached under him, and he's big on doing your job. And I enjoyed playing for him because if you showed up and you worked hard and you gave full effort, maximum effort, he was going to find an opportunity for you to be on the court. So, again, he was one of those coaches that are very convicted to their values. And he didn't care if you were a star player or a bench player. If you did not live up to his standards, then you were not going to play.
Tom Thibodeau,
I would say preparation. When you talk about, being the change you want to see, like when he told guys to work hard, he was working hard. He was in there, and I'm not saying every coach has to be in there at 5:30 to 9 o'clock at night like he was. Obviously we have families and other responsibilities, but the players never question his work ethic. And I think he always felt like, when you're not a former player, then you're going to have to find other ways to get buy-in. And he felt like it would be his hard work, his work ethic, because he was asking the players to work hard. And I mean, there was times where I would drive by the practice facility at 8 or 9 o'clock, and I already knew he had been in there from 5:30, 6 o'clock, and his light would be on. The players used to go back in the evenings, and they would look up there, and his light would be on, and he would be breaking down film. So he gained a tremendous amount of trust from the players by just his work ethic and his preparation. So, I took that from him.
PJ Carlesimo.
I think PJ, just playing for him in college, he was very competent. One of the things that made me appreciate him later in my life was about the time that I got to the pros. I can recall a lot of the drills that I was doing or under Coach Carlesimo in college at Seton Hall. We were doing the same drills. We were doing the same concepts. So he was very competent. Obviously, he held everyone to a high standard, and you had to know your job. But just being competent, knowing what drills to do, not just so much to work hard. You got to be able to work smart. So as a coach, you got to be able to know, especially in the pros nowadays, you're only getting 45 minutes to an hour max of practice. So you got to make your practice plans of quality, and you got to know what you're doing in a very short time.
Billy Donovan.
Coach Donovan really taught me what it means to be a servant leader. You know, the way he treated his players, and I think more important, the way he treated his staff. If you look at his coaching tree, it's no wonder why many of the coaches that are under him go on to do great things and become phenomenal head coaches themselves. Because the 2 years that I was there, you know, he really was receptive and open to, you know, a lot of my suggestions and the other coaches and suggestions. And I would come in there and say, Coach, I want to try this today. And he said, let's do it. And I said, Coach, I want to like switch it up and try to watch some, you know, incorporate some movie clips or into my film and to show the players. And he would say, awesome. You know, he will always encourage us to think outside the box and not just do the same thing over and over again. And he always made, you know, his staff feel involved in the process. You know, we would have our coaches meetings. And a lot of times he wouldn't speak. He would just let the assistant coaches talk and voice their opinions. And obviously he would give his input at the end. But he was very open, receptive. You know, he gave us all a sense of belonging and it made us feel part of the process, not just going along with what he wanted to do. He just wanted to make sure that everyone had total buy-in. So, you know, I learned that lesson from Coach Donovan.
Tremendous. And then, of course, Nick Nurse.
Well, Coach Nurse, he's just, you know, he's good across the board, man. I was so impressed with him because, you know, when you're talking about checking the boxes, from an offensive perspective, you could check it with him. When you go to defense on the other side of the ball, he's just as competent. And then when you talk about the feel for the game as far as, you know, X and O's and strategies, equally as good. And then I think even greatest suit is just his feel for the players and people. You know, he just knows how to manage emotions. You know, he said this publicly about just having that expectation of winning, you know, expect to win. And when we won our championship last year, you know, the first thing he started to do is he was just an advocate about having the right mindset going into the season. You know, he said we can win it. And that was the first conversation that I had with him. And so I learned about the power of belief and the message that you constantly have to send to the players because they're getting messages from everyone else, you know, from media, from the girlfriends, from the wives, from their best friends, from their agents. And so as a head coach and as a coach period, you're going to have to combat some of those things that they're hearing. So you're going to have to deliver a message sometimes 1,000 times over until it's well received. But the one thing that I learned from him is that you really have to address the mindset first. You know, getting people in the right frame of mind, and he's a master at that. You know, we faced a lot of adversity winning that championship last year, and he was able to control the narrative like no other. And the players responded to him. And so as assistant coach, sometimes you're fortunate to cross paths with a head coach that is destined for greatness. And I feel like a fortunate, you know, being under some tremendous coaches, and Coach Nurse is one of those coaches that, you know, being on the staff, you know, you're going to be able to reap a lot of the benefits because, I mean, this guy's a winner and he knows what it takes to win.
Just awesome, Coach. Thank you for painting a picture of all the different influences and the whole process of developing a coaching philosophy. And, you know, again, it's just such a wonderful experience for you to be able to share all this with us. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And like I said before, you know, I really respect what you do for the coaching profession. You know, it's important that we continue to move the coaching profession forward. And I believe that you play a tremendous part in that. And, I just wanted to thank you myself.
Honored to have you say that, Coach. Thanks again. And everyone will love this podcast. So, all right, Coach, take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and to give the Basketball Podcast and this week's guest a shout out on social media to show your support for us sharing the game. And to stay up to date on all things Basketball Immersion, subscribe to our newsletter at basketballimmersion.com/newsletter.